Right, listen, let's begin. I mean, we're obviously here to talk about the work of our superstar poster man here, Graham Humphreys. I've known him for, I think, 100 years, isn't it? We go back
150, I think.
Go so far. And of course, when we did FrightFest, I mean, the first person we thought of to actually sort of put us the stamp to brand it was, of course, Graham. And, you know, he comes up trumps year after year after year, as some of you are actually wearing. So the idea of this is to promote your new book, which is Drawing Blood. When's it going on sale or shipping?
Well, it's on pre-orders now, so you can order it now, but it's shipping on the 16th of October. But the exhibition, which begins on the 28th of October, is the official launch as such.
And basically is it a poster book of everything that you've gone through your work and chosen everything, right?
Yeah, it's kind of the best, I think, or the stuff I'm proudest of. So not everything is in there, and of course a lot of the work I've done over the years is not horror. So there's a whole selection of stuff which nobody will ever see, I'm glad to say. So this is purely the horror stuff, with one or two exceptions. But yeah, I wanted it to be pretty much the whole career from The Evil Dead through to all the current stuff for Arrow. And a few things that probably nobody's seen before as well.
And also interesting about the book is, I mean, you were kind enough to ask me to do a little preface for you, but you also asked really good people like, you know,
well, it was
Sam
important.
Raimi.
I didn't just want the images. So with each image, there's a little explanation of what the job is and how it came about. And for me, it was important to give it a place to exist in. And for me, it was important to have people like Alan Jones write a piece. My friend Billy there has written something for me as well. Richard Stanley, who of course I've worked with over the years. Sam Raimi offered a piece as well. There's a whole list of people in there, but what it does, it just gives it a context. And the other thing was, it's interesting that it kind of charts the history of home entertainment as well from, obviously, The Evil Dead was the first simultaneous theatrical and VHS release. And so it kind of charts that whole sort of cinema theatrical release through the VHS period through to DVD and Blu-ray.
Well, listen, let's go right back to the beginning. We want to know everything. You know, we are here to probe you. Right?
Okay.
Right, and you will get your chance later on. But I mean, when did you first realise that you actually had an artistic, you know, bent, so to speak?
From the age of about 3, literally from about the age of 3. I mean, I just started drawing as soon as I could. As soon as I could pick up something to draw with, that's what I was doing.
Really?
Yeah.
Have you still got any of those early works?
No, I think the wallpaper has probably been covered over by now.
So seriously, so your parents really did they nurture that? Did they think that you were doing a good?
I don't think it was apparent that was going to be, you know, you know, 3 years old, you're not really going to define your career at that age. But certainly when I was growing up in junior school and throughout all the school years, I was always drawing. At secondary school, I do remember virtually everything I did in a book, you know, exercise book, would always be finished with some sort of drawing. History lessons, English lessons, you know, if you did an essay, there would always be some sort of illustration element in there as well. So I think that, you know, I knew that's what I was going to be doing at some point.
And you've said that Salisbury College of Art was like a defining moment in your life.
Yeah, it was. I was very lucky.
Precisely?
Well, I was very lucky that at the time it was one of the few colleges that had a very good reputation for graphic design, illustration. Had some great lecturers and visiting lecturers as well who'd come down from London a couple of days a week. And so I was very fortunate to have some very inspiring people there. And you know, the other important thing, you may ask about this anyway, but it's that period, 1976 through to 1980, was a very important period for music, obviously, in the UK. And you know, I can't emphasise enough how much that defined what I did then and what I do now.
You mean like, I mean, you're talking about...
I'm talking about punk rock, yeah.
You're talking about punk in particular, which is one of the reasons, again, why we connect, because of my association with that.
Yeah, that naughty picture review, yes.
Huh?
The naughty picture review in Sex, yes.
Yeah. I mean, but Jamie Reid, obviously...
We've all seen it.
You've all seen it.
And
so
literally
really
it.
I'm not bothered about it. I mean, but so you like, did you see yourself as like a Jamie Reid character? Jamie was the person who actually did, you know, the cut-out letters and defined the sort of the Pistols look.
Well, his work was very much the graphic design element, and for me, although I trained as a graphic designer, my work was always going to be illustration anyway. Then Jamie didn't really, he has illustrated obviously, but my work was always more about the film poster thing, and it's, you know, film posters was something I was aware of probably from about the age of about 12, 11, 12, and I think at that moment when I first saw, I became aware of film posters, that's when I knew that was really where I wanted to go.
Well, simple, really simple as
Yeah,
that.
yeah,
Even though you've said that your first sort of like exposure to horror and that sort of was on television more than it was actually film. I mean,
Yeah, certainly, yeah.
You know, like Lost in Space.
Yeah.
Though Doctor Who obviously is
certainly.
another one, isn't it?
Yeah, the Monsters, the Addams Family, anything which was a bit odd or strange was, you know, immediately attractive to me.
But what was the very first horror movie that you can remember making a real impact on you?
A very silly one called The Fiend Without a Face.
It's not
Black
silly,
and
it's
white.
fun.
That's a stop motion brains and spinal cords. And yeah, it wasn't the brains that terrified me. It was there's a moment in the film. I don't know if you're familiar with Fiend Without a Face at all.
Everybody in this place is.
Okay. There's the moment when this guy has obviously had his brains partly sucked, and he arrives in this kind of town hall meeting, and he's sort of just moaning, comes through the door, and he's obviously suffered this horrible kind of thing. And for some reason, something about the noise he made and the way he looked just absolutely petrified me. And it took me 15 years before I could watch the film again. It frightened me that much, honestly.
And this was what made you think that I'm going to sort of like work in horror posters?
Well, I think I was fascinated by the power of those images. That, you know, if it could do that to me, I mean, you know, if you get that on paper in poster form, then, you know, it's a winning formula.
It is tragic the way the whole sort of like poster art has gone, isn't it? You're keeping it alive and very much, but the way it's actually been watered down so much. Back in the 60s and 70s when they really did do those in-your-face posters, they were so fabulous, weren't they? I mean, I think most of us actually collect these. I mean, they're just so great.
Well, there was a great tradition of illustrated posters, which really was fed by a small group of studios where they'd have a number of illustrators working together. So in fact, you'd sometimes find that one person would do one particular section, then somebody else would perhaps do the background, and people might be able to be better at drawing hands. So yeah, there was a whole sort of mix of people working on single images quite often. But then you also had the apprenticeships happening as well, though, so that illustrators would be trained up by, you know, somebody who already had a very good reputation. So this kind of doesn't exist anymore, unfortunately, though.
Now, what was your first sort of paid job? Was it your NME illustrations, or what was it when it came to design?
It was an educational publication called Handling English, and my grammar is appalling, so it taught me quite a lot about grammar. But it was a book with a series of cartoons trying to make a very dry subject amusing. The ideas were already supplied and some little thumbnail sketches, so I just had to create cartoons. So just give them a bit more life.
If we saw those cartoons now, would it reflect what you're doing now, or did in the 80s and 90s?
Probably not, no.
No?
No.
So there wasn't really, you did really develop your own
Actually,
sort of
funnily
style.
enough, the daughter of the man who wrote the books got in touch with me recently, I mean, literally about 2 years ago, and her father had passed away, but what she wanted to do was keep his legacy going by republishing these 3 books, and so she managed to get hold of me. I said, would you be interested in doing these all over again? I think it was going to be about 2,000 individual cartoons, and it just worked out just so stupidly expensive. It would have taken me about 6 months to do, and I just thought, I can't do this. So it hasn't happened.
So what did you do for NME exactly?
Well, they used to have a letters page, and they used to like have a little illustration just to sort of dress it up a bit, though. So the illustrations would always be about, you know, trying to encourage people to write in. And that first NME illustration, I think, came about through, I think it must have been through the art director who was working there at the time, who happened to be a friend of a friend. And as these things do often work, you know, it's kind of very often about who you know, and those odd little connections which you can't really anticipate or expect.
And then you moved into like men's magazines like Fiesta and Nave.
Fiesta and Nave, yeah.
What were you doing for those?
Well, again, that was another odd connection. It was a friend of a college friend who just happened to have got this job as art director at Nave and Fiesta magazines. And I don't know if you know these titles at all, but they were quite sort of tatty. Yes, you know them well, don't you? Quite tatty, kind of you know, top shelf mags. And they used to. I mean, it was one area where new illustrators would find their first work. indeed, Kim Newman, used to write little pieces for some of the magazines, and we worked together on at least one of those projects. But basically, you would look anywhere for your work. It's just because all we're trying to do is earn money. And Nave and Fiesta were great. I had about a dozen jobs over them over a couple of years. Just join these kind of busty ladies, basically.
Now, I know you don't like talking about this, but it's the Monster Club where I first realised, I found out who you were. I mean, because I did a lot of stuff on that film, and Milton Subotsky was then telling me that you'd actually drawn the poster, and that was the first time I ever heard your name. And so, and you seem to be sort of like a bit sort of like against that one now. Is it because you find it so, not indicative of
Well,
your
it just technically it's not a very good piece of work, and I did struggle with it because my original brief was to create this poster which had all these kind of creatures in it, and obviously a portrait of Vincent Price. And I love Vincent Price and I love monsters. And for me, it should have been a dream job, but it kind of wasn't, because the way a lot of posters used to work then is that they'd have a visual already supplied, and you basically would work to that format, that visual. And the reference material wasn't that great either. But the main thing was that I'd really run with a horror theme, and they just found that the image was too horrific for them. I mean, Pete, you've seen the original, few people have, but it's not particularly horrific, though.
Well, and when did the Evil Dead job come along? I mean, how did this happen? Because this was the one that sort of like made you really your
Well,
career.
again, it's just a sort of a series of coincidences and just odd connections. I had a college friend who was working with a small design company, and it was actually their receptionist who had seen me come in, sort of lunchtimes and things, just to meet my mate. And she said, "Oh, have you taken your folio to this new company called Palace Pictures?" And she said that they're starting up a distribution arm, and I'm sure they'd love your work. So I made an appointment, went to see Steve Woolley. He wasn't there that day, but I saw Paul Webster, and I think Joanne Sellers was there. So I left some photocopies of my work, and it was a particular painting, which was oddly a portrait of Joan Crawford, I don't know how, but with bats caught in her hair, and just the word vamp in sort of snakeskin written across the top. And they obviously saw that and thought that had the look of they were looking for the Evil Dead.
Before it was released in England, most people know that poster as like the hand coming out of the ground clutching. I mean, why did they not go with that? Why did they think they had to do something different?
Well, I think they felt that the image wasn't really selling the film. I also think that the guys at the time, particularly Steve Woolley, Paul Webster, kind of wanted something a bit more rock and roll. I think that's probably the best way I can describe that. I mean, Paul was really into music, and he was making videos for people like the Meteors, and so he was really into the whole punk rock, rockabilly thing as well. And I think they just thought that actually that's really where they needed to market the film, with a sort of kind of young music kind of led audience.
And that crystallised your sort of look, really. Would you
Well, yeah, I
say
think the look had already been established through some of the college work, but certainly that poster, the way I structured it and the way I sort of worked the colours and textures, that did then become to define the work, though.
You've said also that you've wanted to give it like a 3D feel. I mean, that was quite an important aspect to you.
Well, I've always been interested in 3D films and 3D comics as well. And so that idea of having something up front and something in the background and sort of middle ground as well, and using the window motif as well. So you have something behind the window and something in front of the window. So the whole thing was intended to almost look like a hologram. I'd been to see an exhibition of holograms called Light Fantastic at the ICA whilst I was at college, and there was a sort of quality to the light and colour on these sheets of glass with little pinpoints of bright light and these intense fluorescent colours as well, and that's what I was trying to capture.
Do you follow us there? I mean, do the film companies come to you and say it needs to speak to this demographic and you need to put this here, or do they give you completely free range?
I think after the Evil Dead, people would say, we want an Evil Dead. I mean, that happens a lot to people, though. You have something that's successful and they want to replicate that success. But it's interesting, with that in mind, then going on to maybe something like Nightmare on Elm Street, where the style is so completely different. But for me, the film was not the Evil Dead, and the whole texture of it was so different anyway, though, that I knew that it had to be a whole different kind of way of working.
Did they credit you, Paris, for actually, making it a success? I mean, it was going to be a hit
did actually.
anyway.
No. In fairness to them, Nick Powell did say, actually, you made my company so much money, I can't thank you enough. And I thought, well, can you just pay me a bit more then? But the fee was very low. I think I was paid about 350 quid for The Evil Dead, a little bit more for Nightmare on Elm Street. But they had a big sort of celebration dinner, invited me to that.
Wow. And did you then become the go-to guy for literally every single horror movie that was being, released here?
Well, it's quite funny because I did go to quite a few video companies, and they would actually turn down the work and say we can't use you because we like to use, American illustrators or Italian illustrators.
Or a photograph from Cannibal Holocaust, and.
Well, yeah, there was. I remember going to, I think it was Medusa Films, and they said that your work is a bit too rough, and we think that we like to use kind of quite skilled illustrators for our stuff, and so I kind of just thought, okay then, just felt a bit depressed and despondent, thinking, well, obviously I've got to improve, but I think what it was, that people didn't kind of see that there could be other ways of selling stuff other than this kind of very traditional style.
Right. I mean, how aware were you of sort of like the really famous, especially Hammer? In my intro in his book, I liken you to Tom Chantrell, who I love. That he's my favourite Hammer illustrator. And did you feel like you're following that tradition?
Yeah, definitely. I was aware of Tom's work when I was quite young, mostly through the Hammer stuff. And I think I was quite interested in the fact that the style was quite aggressive and quite raw. His work is never really particularly finished at all. And I thought that gave it a sort of a life, which probably some of the more sort of quality, probably worked stuff didn't actually have. I think stuff should sort of vibrate and move, and you can only do that with this kind of raw quality.
Is there any poster from this particular era that you were really, really proud of?
Of my own work?
Well, yes.
Probably Freddy's Revenge, I think, is probably still my favourite.
Why?
I think it's to do with the colours and the power that character has, and I think I'd managed to capture the essence of Freddy in that, and also I think because the film was not very good, and I do remember going through it and thinking, what can I lift out of this to make a good poster, and actually nothing. And so I looked at it again. It was actually the opening sequence. I thought, actually, this is it. This is fantastic. Just that bus, it's sort of disappearing to this like hell-like hole, and to me, it was almost like a sort of Salvador Dali moment. And in my mind, it was almost like a Dali painting.
I mean, did you ever sort of? I remember. I had a quote on one of the posters that you had to do. I mean, how does that figure into things? Do you have to take that into account when, like, the film company comes to you and say, this has to have room for, like, quotes from critics and stuff like that?
Yeah, you have to be aware that there's going to be a title and, bits and bobs all around. I mean, to be quite honest, when I work on stuff, I tend to ignore that and just think, well, we'll find space for it anyway, though that can be a problem sometimes. But with Freddy's Revenge, I knew there would be a big title right in the middle, so there was just the flames and the jumper. So I prepared for that one. But, quite often you don't really think about things like that.
I know Sam Raimi thought that your poster was great. Have other directors commented on how really appreciative they are?
Oh, yeah, certainly. But, odd people like Mike Leigh, for instance, I worked on a film called Life is Sweet, and he absolutely loved the poster and bought the little illustrations from me as well, though. Wow. But he said I was the first person to actually capture the essence of Alison Steadman. Wow. I know, amazing.
I mean, obviously you prefer doing horror posters, I'd imagine. But I mean, when other things like that come along, I mean, is it because you can't turn them down money-wise, or do you choose which ones you want to do?
Mostly not. You just take on anything that comes to you, generally speaking. So, that Mike Leigh experience, and I love Mike Leigh's films, so it's a real joy to work on it. I still do work which is not actually genre stuff, and I think it's quite important to do that as well. That I think you can become quite sort of tunnel visioned almost, though, just working one area. For me, it's a good challenge as well, and a discipline to be able to work on other stuff.
Do you have to be a horror fan to be a good horror poster designer?
Probably not. No.
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 Who else do you like then? Who works in the same area? Is there anybody you particularly?
What, contemporaries?
Yeah.
I mean, well, obviously Tom Hodge, do design. I love his work because he's recreating the whole 80s VHS Phil, and he does it incredibly well. I don't know. There are so many new illustrators out there, and they all have their different styles, and so they have merits in different ways. So I wouldn't identify particular individuals at all, because I think there's actually so many people out there now doing different things that actually you just kind of think, well, this is great that there are illustrators still being employed to do this stuff.
So what was your dream assignment out of everything you've ever done? And what was the one missed opportunity you think you would have loved, you would have killed to actually have designed?
Well, the job I'm most proud of probably over the recent years was the piece I did for the Hammer at the Vault Festival, which was run by a club called the Flickr Club, which was where they actually join up the literary origins of films and actually get in a reader to read a passage from a book, then they'll screen the film. So they did a season which is purely English Gothic, and so obviously I went to Hammer and had these amazing people like Mark Gatiss read from Hound of the Baskervilles, Fenella Felding read from Frankenstein. All these kind of interesting, unlikely couplings as well, though. But it was a chance to do some great Hammer portraiture, and this was done in conjunction with Hammer films as well, though. So in a way, it was like the perfect Hammer film poster.
Is there a length of time that you take to do a poster, or does it not work like that? It takes as long as it takes?
Well, there'll be an initial sketch stage, which can be, you know, just coming up with the ideas, which might take hours, could take a day, depending on the project, and then looking at the material that's available and compiling all the elements that you feel are correct for the job. Then a sketch process, and then the client, you know, giving their approval or not. Maybe you revisit one of the sketches and, you know, move things around a little bit. But the painting process is usually anywhere between 2 days and 4 days. I think probably 5 days is the most I've spent on anything at all. But the quickest I've worked on something is usually about 1 day.
Right. And of course, you can't just live by this alone. I mean, you did other stuff as well, like mother care design for...
Yeah, food packaging and just odd sort of things. I mean, anything that people would give me, really. I mean, there's a whole load of stuff out there which, you know, as I say, you'll never see, and I hope you never do. Actually, but people do sometimes just say, oh, did you do this? And they'll send me an image from something I've even forgotten I've done. And I have to say, yes, I did do that. And it's awful, isn't it, though? And they say, oh, you know. But yeah, there's a lot of stuff out there.
And then you went to work, well, you did work for Creative Partnership, which was Chris Fowler's company, Chris Fowler being, you know, friend of FrightFest and also the novelist.
That's right.
So that must have been a great time. I mean, you know.
Well, it was. I was approached by actually somebody else who was working with Chris at the time. They'd just set up a studio, part of the Creative Partnership, and I was asked to do some visuals for a couple of posters, and then I did a couple of illustrations for them. And I was doing more and more work for them, and we obviously seemed to get on quite well. And so I was invited just to sit in the studio, just be there and use it as I wanted, but then they could use me as and when they needed as well, but, you know, being paid as well. And so that relationship, you know, still goes on today. So I'm still working with the Creative Partnership right now.
And did you do any of Chris Fowler's book covers? Did you?
Yep. I did one which was terrible, so I'm not even going to talk about that one. But Hell Train was one I was very, very pleased with, though.
Oh, right.
And there have been a couple of others as well. I can't even remember the titles now, but yeah, hopefully there'll be some more as well.
And do you get tired of it? I mean, is it just boring coming up with the same, you know, like another horror film? I've got to do this.
God, no, never.
Never.
No. Now, every film has its merits, and I always find something in a project which really excites me. You know, it doesn't matter how bad the film is. There's always something in there you can pull out and play with.
You know, Graham did the Mad Monkey, you know, from when they renamed Phenomena Creepers here, which was a good. I love that poster. I still think the title's awful. But
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah, it's a very stupid title.
you know, and Santa Sangre was another one that I thought it was a great one. You did too.
Yeah, it's odd because they commissioned the poster actually from friends of mine, and that was a photographic poster. So my Santa Sangre was just the VHS cover. And I'd love to revisit that at some point because, again, it's another one I'm not very pleased with.
And then moving right up to date, I mean, when did the whole Arrow DVD covers come into play? I mean, that must have been a dream assignment again because you went back to revisit some of the films that you loved.
Well, that was Francesco from Arrow who approached me to do the cover for Slaughter High, which he identified as a quintessentially 80s film and wanted to recreate the 80s look as he described it. I mean, this is something I've talked about before, that although people always think of the 80s as being really the era in which my work exists, for me it always existed in the 50s and 60s and 70s. I hated the 80s. And so my work for me is actually, it goes way back. But yes, he wanted this kind of particular look, and I think it just seemed that they were doing a lot more releases from that era, so I'd get more and more work from them. But I think now, hopefully by now, I've taken it away from that kind of this 80s kind of, bracket, and moved it a bit forward now.
I mean, we always usually have a meeting with you about like 3 months before FrightFest starts, doesn't it? And we say, give us some ideas for the poster this year, and we say we think it's a good idea because it's this, this, and this, and we try and give you some sort of idea of what it is.
You throw me some bones, and I chew on them a bit,
and then you come back to us with a design.
And say, so I've ignored your
and we've just said
brief,
this is terrible. Start again.
Yeah.
But do you like doing the FrightFest?
I love them. I mean, the trick for me is to always bring in some element of projection or cinema in there. So it's always like coming up with some little device. And actually, I think this is my favourite. I know that Greg said that he liked this, but for me, it was. I don't know why we kind of settled on the idea of magic. It just came about, and I know that I'd been fascinated by magic lanterns, the old Victorian magic lanterns, and it made me think of the magic lantern cycle that Kenneth Anger made. And then thinking about the magic as well, Aleister Crowley, so that's the Aleister Crowley kind of a sort of very famous photograph of him in this pose. So that's where that all came about.
Was it hard to pick the posters for the book? And I imagine that you would have had to have gone back copyright-wise. I mean, you don't own the copyright, do you?
No. Well, the problem is with all this artwork, I had to get permission from all the individual commissioning bodies, which meant picking my way back through all the distributors over the years. And some of them I just couldn't find, so those illustrations just aren't in there at all. It was a condition of the publisher that there would be no comeback on anything at all. So particularly the older stuff, trying to find out who owned the copyright or license. I mean, the Nightmare on Elm Street stuff has been through several hands. It now resides with Warner's. I found out eventually, having gone through, because I would have gone to Palace, obviously they don't exist anymore. Then it went on to New Line, and then it's been through different ownerships, but they now own all the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise. And getting those in there was very important for me anyway, and I did think I might have to pay them some money, but I just had to sign this huge document whereby they literally, you have to sign that they own the copyright throughout the universe in perpetuity. So anyway, I signed the thing and they're in there now. Finding the ownership for the Evil Dead was a bit more complex because, again, you trace back through Palace, New Line, all these different people, and it has, again, been through different ownerships. But anyway, it turned out I ended up going to somebody at Fright Rags in the US. I'd just done a T-shirt for them for Army of Darkness. And I said, who on earth deals with this licensing? She said, well, we deal with this bloke. It was like a small merchandising company, and he apparently does all the licensing for the Evil Dead. And it turned out he's a good friend of Sam Raimi's, that's why he does it. And then it turned out also this guy said, oh, you're Graham Humphreys, aren't you? I've got one of your pieces of work. He said, I've got the artwork for the Kindred, which I bought off somebody years ago. And I was thinking, that's funny, because I never got that back from the printer. Where did it go? And now it's in the States. So anyway, somebody made some money out of it, more than I would have done probably. But yeah, I managed to get through to him, who said, yeah, of course, I know Sam. I'll put you in touch. Here's his email address. And I got an email back straight away saying, oh, yeah, I remember meeting you way back when The Evil Dead came out in the UK. And he said, absolutely no problem at all. I own the rights, and you can have them. I'll write a piece for you as well. So that was the easiest one.
Wow. Yeah. But where do you see it all going? I mean, cinema poster design has changed vastly. I mean, where do you see it all actually going, if at all? I mean,
how will it end? Is that what
yes,
you're trying to say,
exactly.
I've no idea, but people like Arrow, Odeon Entertainment have identified that there is a collector's market, and it is about the collectors, a small number of collectors, and if you provide a beautiful package for them, they will buy it, even though they know the film. But if you add in the extra kind of layers of interest and create an object, which is actually a collectible object, then I think that's kind of still going to carry on for quite a long time.
What's the most number of poster designs you've had to come up with for a single film?
What in terms of sketch ideas and stuff? Probably about 12, 13 maybe. normally it's about, I try to give people 3 ideas, and actually I was taught this at college, that always give 3 ideas. One you don't want to do, one that you don't want them, they won't choose as well, and then one in the middle, which actually is the one you want to do. So you actually you
So
go
you
to
force
the
them to
extremes,
pick
and
it.
you force their hand basically.
And does
And
that
you can
always
do that.
work?
Yeah, and also if you not argue, but debate with the client, saying, look, I really think you should do this because, and actually if you do have valid reasons for your thinking, then they will listen. I mean, to an extent, the client does like to be led by the artist because, they're trusting you to deliver the work which will sell their film, whatever, as well as possible. And so, you have to be on their side, but they have to be on your side as well, though, to that extent. So there's an element of trust which has to run through. And largely, I'm quite lucky that that does happen.
So that keeps ongoing, does that mean they come back to use you all the time because they just trust your instincts and everything that you do?
Yeah. Well, I'd like to think that's the case anyway, though.
Thank you very much, Graham Humphreys.
Thank you.